Good afternoon, everyone. So, today we're going to do a quick roundup of the news from around the Islamic world. So, to start with, I'm going to look at a story that many of you may have heard of before. It's actually from earlier on this year. Thought I'd look into it. Senior cleric claims religion in Iran is weak and that 50,000 mosques have closed. This reported originally the 6th of February earlier on this year. You can see there that Mohammed uh, Abul Qasim Dulabi. He's the Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi's special representative in clerical affairs. So let's get into it and see what it actually says. A senior Iranian cleric says around 50,000 of Iran's 75,000 mosques are closed, showing the declining numbers of Iranians attending. Expressing regret over the low numbers engaged in worship, Mohammed who serves as the liaison between Ibrahim Raisi's administration and the country's seminaries, said on Thursday that the numbers are a worrying admission for a state built around the principles of Islam. Dulabi, who is also a member of the Assembly of Experts, a deliberative body empowered to appoint the supreme leader, said the outcome of religion in Iran has led to people leaving religion, emphasizing the weakening of religiosity among society and, in turn, a weakening legitimacy of a government ruling by religious diktat. He said, when people look at the output of the religion, they decide to enter the religion or leave the religion, with reasons including the humiliation of people in the name of religion, falsification of religious concepts and teachings, and depriving people of a decent life and creating poverty in the name of religion. So he's been pretty honest there about all of this and pretty open. He made the remarks as growing numbers of Iranians of all ages are becoming weary of the regime's justification of Islam as the base of its brutal dictatorship, reflected by months of violent protests in September in the wake of the deaths in morality policy custody of Masha Amini, arrested for the inappropriate use of her hijab. Now, obviously, this caused quite a bit of concern, and typically there was backlash, and he had to kind of backtrack to some extent what he had just said. So, the case here. So, are mosques closing because interest in religion is waning in Iran? To know the veracity of this claim, the DFRAC team did a Google search with the help of some Persian keywords. During this, the team got some media reports. According to a news report published by the website hosanews.com under the title Advisor to the President on the Misuse of the News of the Closure of Mosques, Advisor to President Rishi Mohammed, etc., what statement was given in reality. Some foreign enemies and some of their domestic traitors have misused my statement as the reason for the lack of religiosity of the people after the news attributed to me about the closure of a large number of mosques in the country, while there is no such implication. So you can see there's quite a contrast here now. There's kind of an attempt to say, well, no, no, I never said such a thing. They're misusing my words. Like we saw the quotations there. You can see them here. The various reasons for why people are no longer going to mosques. Okay, and yet now we have a backtrack, blaming it on foreign enemies and so forth. Obviously, they realized that this was too much of a disclosure. Um, so now with the explanation is the closing of the doors of many mosques is a matter that has nothing to do with the religiosity of the people. Right? That's quite a completely the opposite of what he had just said earlier. Rather, it is due to a number of other reasons, including the lack of infrastructure necessary for the imams to stay. Really? All of a sudden, there's no infrastructure? The lack of supervision of the mosque from the centre of local management. Surely all of these things could be easily rectified. The mosque being confined to the prayer hall. These are all very flimsy excuses, if you ask me. One of these factors is the absence of a full time imam. does that really justify the closing of a mosque? Could an imam not at least do it partially, part of the time? Could mosque not share an imam? Is that not possible? The management of the mosque requires the necessary infrastructure, including a stable resource to cover the cost of hiring two full time employees. Surely, if the mosques are full with people, that it would be possible to pay for two full time employees. Surely that wouldn't be too much to ask. The role of madrasa in training the imams is also very important. Again, it doesn't seem like great reason for this. It goes on to say, before the Islamic Revolution, all such expenses were borne by the people themselves, but it is clear that in the present situation, the expectation of people to bear all such expenses is a misplaced expectation. Because, on the one hand, all national resources such as oil and mines are under the control of the government, and on the other hand, people's economic problems have increased, especially in recent years. Okay, so the idea here is that people expect the government to pay for the costs of running a mosque. Okay. Now, I just don't see that as a good enough excuse. I think it's possible for people to chip in and pay the what would be a limited cost if you have hundreds of people going to a mosque and and everything is hunky dory with Islam in Iran. Surely they'll find the money even in circumstances where it's economically tough at the minute in Iran. I just don't buy that one. In such a situation, the possibility of serious participation of the people has reduced, especially when people see that the government spends money in most cultural areas, and when it comes to mosques, some people expect all the expenses to be borne by the people. I don't see how that could be a good enough reason for closing two-thirds of the mosques. Okay, so according to the conclusion of this report, the fact check by DFRAC confirms that the viral claim that the senior Alim Dulabi, advisor to President Raishi or Reishi, has given a statement that more than 50,000 mosques in Iran have been closed due to dwindling public interest is misleading. What do you think? I think probably what he said originally was the truth. Um, Closing 50,000 mosques because there's not enough money to pay for their running doesn't seem credible. The government could easily have said, listen, we have to cut our support for the mosques by maybe 50% or something. And we expect the people, if the people actually want the mosque to stay open, to pay for the other part. But elsewhere, when I've looked online around this uh, situation, what is being reported is that it's just elderly people attending the mosques. A lot of people have just stopped going. And this is the reason why the mosques have to close, because it's no longer economically viable for the Iranian government to fund buildings which are empty by and large. Okay, so let's move now to Indonesia. An interesting story here. It's in relation to the use of the term Isa Almasih. Um, so Christians in Indonesia have long demanded not to use Islamic terms when referring to Jesus Christ in official communications. So there has been a bit of success here, and this is literally news off the press, hot off the press from yesterday. Okay, Indonesia's coordinating minister for human development and culture announces the replacing of the term Isa al Masih with Jesus Christus, or Jesus Christ, the official translation of Jesus Christ by Indonesia Christians, on September 12th. So the Indonesian government announced a change in the use of terms referring to Jesus Christ in official documents, responding to long-standing demands of Christians not to use Islamic terms. So this is fantastic news for Indonesian Christians. It's great to see that the government saw sense. Um, it's actually really important the terms are used, because by using Islamic terms for it, Christians are kind of being forced to present their religion on Islamic terms, and it's kind of like they're being framed in a certain light. And it's important that Christians frame their own beliefs, not just be framed within an Islamic frame. Um, so it says further in an announcement on September 12th, the coordinating minister for human development culture said that the government had decided to officially replace the term Isa Almasih with Jesus Christus, the official term that Indonesian Christians use for Jesus Christ. In official documents such as the list of national religious holidays, the government will use the term Jesus Christus, he said. The change in nomenclature was based on a proposal from the Ministry of Religious Affairs. He said the change of the nomenclature would be approved by a presidential regulation. Um, also says this is a suggestion for Protestants and Catholics that the name of the nomenclature be changed to what they believe in. So, good news there. Fantastic news. Great to see that Christians are having an impact, and that they can change things despite being a minority. Even though it is often said that Isa and Jesus are the same, they are actually different, not only theologically but also sociologically. He said that Jesus was the son of Mary and Joseph in the Bible, and Mary was the daughter of Joachim and Anna, and lived towards the first century of the era of Christ. But in Islam, Isa is the son of Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron. So Jesus was Moses' nephew. Something like that is impossible in Christian and Jewish chronology. He added that Isa, according to Islam, was a prophet and did not die on the cross. According to the Gospels and extra biblical history, Jesus died on the cross and on the third day rose from the dead. The change is a welcome step which describes the understanding and experience of Christian faith based on the Bible. So, fantastic news. So, next we're going to turn to the Assassin's Creed of all things. So they made an announcement. The Assassin's Creed Mirage introduce, introduces custom settings to respect Islam. Um, so it allows players to disable music in Ubisoft's stealth games so it doesn't clash with the Islamic call to prayer. So a customizable setting is being added to Assassin's Creed Mirage to ensure that the soundtrack does not coincide or clash with in-game instances of the Islamic call to prayer. So what do you think of that? So uh, in the game, whenever the call to Islamic prayer occurs, they basically will have a setting that will mean that the background music cuts out story. Now we're next going to turn to Saudi Arabia, and it is in relation to the softening of the rules, as it were. Saudi reforms softening Islam's role, but kingdom takes hard line against dissent. So this is dated today, September 13th. Let's have a look and see what is happening. Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, is bringing a new vision of a moderate, balanced Saudi Islam by minimizing the role of Saudi religious institutions, once seen as critical to the monarchy. For decades, Saudi kings provided support to religious scholars and institutions that advocated an austere form of Sunni Islam known as Wahhabism. The kingdom enforced strict codes of morality, placing restrictions on the rights of women and religious minorities, among others. Under MBS, women have been allowed to drive, co-educational classrooms, movie theatres, and all-night concerts in the desert, in which men and women dance together, are a new normal. Scholars Yasmin Farouk and Nathan J. Brown call the diminishing role of Wahhabi religious scholars within Saudi domestic and international policy nothing short of a revolution in Saudi affairs. I think it is a revolution, and I think it's a necessary revolution. The Saudis realize that Wahhabism is not going to be a friend of theirs in the coming years, because eventually people are going to be using less and less oil, and they're going to have to turn ever more to tourism to make up for the shortfall of revenue. And to do that, they're going to have Westerners visiting their country. And country that is pushing Wahhabism is not really conducive to a growth in tourism, and they just realize that. And I'd like to think that it isn't just to do with money, and that they actually do realize that Wahhabism is extreme and they need to kind of modernize. I'd like to think that that is also part of the scenario, the thinking. Um, MBS acknowledges that these reforms risk infuriating certain constituents or could even provoke retaliation. As a scholar who studies interpretations of Islamic law to justify or contest militancy, I follow these reforms closely. This is the author of this article. In the past, Saudis who challenged the authority of Wahhabis have provoked unrest. When King Fayed, who ruled between 1982 and 2005, rejected the advice of his Wahhabi scholars and allowed the US military to station weapons and female service members on Saudi soil, several of them supported a violent insurrection against him. MBS seems unconcerned with such challenges. In an interview broadcast widely throughout the kingdom, MBS chastised Wahhabi scholars, accusing some of falsifying Islamic doctrines. He then detained a major Wahhabi scholar from whom he once sought counsel, charging him with crimes against the monarchy. MBS defended these actions, claiming, "We are returning to what we were before, a country of moderate Islam that is open to all religions, traditions, and people around the globe." Well, I welcome those words and that attempt to change things for the better. I think that's great news. Um, so I commend MBS for all of this. The article goes on to say this proclaimed return of moderate Islam echoes the reforms of MBS's grandfather, King Abdulaziz, founder of the modern Saudi kingdom. This vision rejects policies toward Wahhabi Islam favored by his uncles, King Faisal and King Khalid. Your picture there. Between 1925 and 1932, Abdullah Aziz suppressed Wahhabi scholars and militants who had demanded that he uphold their version of pure Islam and not open the kingdom to trade and development. He did the opposite and asserted the supremacy of the monarchy. The booming Saudi oil economy developed by Abdul Aziz required his son, King Faisal, who ruled from 1964 to 1975, to reconsider the monarchy's relationship with Wahhabism. Unlike Abdul Aziz, Faisal believed Wahhabis would help him save the kingdom. Saudis who felt left behind in the emerging Saudi oil economy had found an inspirational symbol of liberation in Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, who helped overthrow the Egyptian monarchy in 1952 and implemented plans to redistribute Egyptian wealth. Faisal encouraged Wahhabi scholars to work with politically driven Islamists to reject the revolutionary politics of Abdel Nasser's Egypt and craft a new vision of Islam for Saudi youth. Faisal permitted Wahhabi scholars to reform Saudi educational institutions with their conservative Islamic curriculum. Abroad, Faisal scholars presented Wahhabism as an authentic Islamic alternative to the Cold War ideologies of the US and USSR. Wealthy Saudis, these Wahhabi scholars argued, had a religious duty to promote Wahhabism across the globe. Faisal's reforms met with success. King Khalid, who followed Faisal, continued to favour Wahhabi scholars, particularly while responding to two major challenges in 1979. A group of Saudi students who believed Faisal's and Khalid's reforms to be illegitimate seized the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Islam's most sacred site, for 2 weeks in 1979. An attack on the Grand Mosque was viewed as an attack on the monarchy itself, which claims the mantle of custodian of the two holy mosques. The seizure came to a violent end with combined action by French and Saudi military forces. Afterward, Khalid agreed to elevate religious officials who affirmed the Islamic credentials of the monarchy. Also in 1979, other Saudi youth traveled to join the resistance against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. One such Saudi who answered the call that year was Osama bin Laden, who would establish Al Qaeda in 1988. Bin Laden's and Al Qaeda's grievances against the monarchy emerged following King Fayyad's acceptance of an increased deployment of US soldiers to Saudi soil following Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait in 1990. Bin Laden proclaimed the presence of American infidels in Saudi Arabia to be a defilement of Islamic holy lands, an affront to Islamic sensibilities, and demanded the destruction of the monarchy. Al Qaeda launched anti Saudi insurgent campaigns lasting through 2010. Not all conservative Islamic leaders called for violence. As historian Madawi al Rashid notes, many Saudi scholars framed themselves as reformers who sought to correct Fayyad's departures from authentic Islam and restore Faisal's vision. When MBS speaks of a moderate Islam, he's not just condemning the violence of Al Qaeda, he's abandoning the monarchy's accommodations of the Wahhabi establishment. He blames such Wahhabi scholars for the violence that the monarchy faced in 1979 and again in the 1990s and 2000s. He has worked quickly to erase these accommodations and, like his grandfather, affirm the supremacy of the monarchy. So, with all that said, many of these revolutionary changes occurred amid the 2016 unveiling of Saudi Vision 2030, a plan for complete Saudi political, economic, educational, and cultural transformation. NBS believes that this will meet the demands of Saudis under the age of 30, who number more than 60% of the kingdom's population. The religious curriculum shaped by King Faisal is gone, replaced with a Saudi first education which removes Ibn Abdal Wahhab, the founder of Wahhabism, from textbooks and emphasizes Saudi patriotism over a Wahhabi Islamic religious identity. Saudi Arabia has announced it will no longer fund mosques and Wahhabi educational institutions in other countries. This is great news. Saudi religious police, once tasked with upholding public morality, saw their powers curtailed. They no longer have powers of investigation or arrest. They cannot punish behaviours deemed morally inappropriate. Brilliant news. Critics remain unimpressed, noting that demoting religious officials does not diminish the violence of the Saudi state. Religious police continue their online surveillance of social media. In 2018, Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist, was killed following his calls for a continued voice for Islamist reformers in Saudi Arabia. Al Rashid argues that the images of a new Saudi society conceal suppression of Saudi reformers. Some observers note that a growing Saudi surveillance state with capacities to peek into the private lives of Saudis underwrites these reforms. As Peter Mandeville, a scholar of international affairs, observes, the moderate Islam offered by MBS is complicated. On the one hand, it characterizes a new tolerant Saudi Arabian Islam, yet inside the kingdom, Mandeville argues that the moderate Islam of MBS demands that Saudi youth, as good Muslims, will submit to the authority of the monarchy over the kingdom's affairs. Some observers believe this might not be enough. Mohammed Fadel, a professor of Islamic legal history, argues that the current configuration of the Saudi monarchy is incompatible with the kind of independent thought the crown prince is calling for in matters of religion. Saudi society will flourish, he adds, when Prince Mohammed recognizes the right of Muslims to rule themselves politically. With these reforms to Wahhabism, MBS hopes to secure the loyalty of a generation of young Saudis. As Saudi history would indicate, however, such a bargain requires constant renegotiation and renewal. So I think it's a good thing he's making reforms. I think he's probably conscious of the fact that the more reforms he makes, the more likely is that there will be pushback against the concept of the monarchy itself. That there's a danger that people might actually start to want further reforms, including getting rid of the monarchy and having a full blown democracy. There lies the risk for MBS and for the monarchy. So I hope you found this roundup of news helpful. Talk to you all very soon. Bye bye.